This is a Stories to be Told podcast. Hi everyone, Tracy DW here. Welcome to another episode of Stories to be Told, the podcast series. I've always been interested in alternative history. What if JFK had never been assassinated? If Elizabeth I had married and produced an heir? Or if Edward VIII had never abdicated? June the 22nd has become a day for celebrating one particular journey across the Atlantic Ocean. A journey which is now commemorated as the beginning of and symbolic embodiment of a wave of migration from the Caribbean that changed the racial, social, cultural and political makeup of Britain forever. But what if HM Windrush had never docked at Tilbury in Essex? The difference between this particular boat journey and hundreds, if not thousands of others that preceded it, was that in this case there was a willingness by the participants to make that journey. From this first wave of mass migration, we would still have our early pioneers settling in and around the main ports of Liverpool, Cardiff, Bristol, South Shields and London. Many of these settlers established new multiracial communities through intermarriage with the English population. During the 1700s, activists such as Ignatius Santos, Mary Prince and others like them realised that it was not physical brute force, but the spoken and written word that could also raise awareness about the evils of slavery and thus contribute to their emancipation in 1807 and 1833. The 19th and early 20th centuries brought us more pioneers such as Mary Seacole, 1805 to 81, and more than 15,000 Caribbean servicemen and women from the First and Second World Wars. Were these two wars the catalyst for what became the Windrush? This hypothetical absence of Caribbean influence in the UK was the inspiration for my first piece of artwork in my alternative history gallery. What if the Windrush never came to Britain? This piece of art is available for viewing on my website storiestobetold.com and is my interpretation of what we know as the Notting Hill Carnival, depicting a UK almost completely void of Caribbean culture. The event could have been called the Notting Hill Tea Party, and jerk chicken, roti, barbecued corn and rice and peas are replaced with traditional English afternoon tea. Food stands also hint of the traditional British favourites, such as steak and ale pie, eel pie and fish and chips. Revellers would dance to the sounds of local brass bands instead of the blare of soca pumping out of sound systems. Everything in this artwork depicts what is quintessentially English, from the straw boater hats, bow ties and breeches worn by gentlemen, to the red, white and blue bunting with the Union Jack suggesting a society that is unapologetically monocultural. Only the underground sign just left of the sousaphone hints at the emerging infrastructure of public service. Who would be working in these and other public sector jobs that were needed post-war after 1948? The depiction of ethnicities is sparse in the picture, as it hints at the impact of the absence of mass migration of not just African Caribbeans but Africans as an ethnic group. What would have been the impact on the ethnic population across Britain? The Office of National Statistics, ons.gov.uk, shows that pre-1950s, the main group of migrants to come to Britain were Irish and Polish, followed by Indians migrating from the newly independent state in 1947. From the 1950s, the Windrush generation increased the Caribbean population from 6,000 to 100,000 between 1951 and 61, and by another 71% between 1961 and 71. By 2011, nearly half of this Caribbean population lived in just 13 out of the 348 local authorities across Britain. The majority of this group reside in London boroughs of Brent, Lewisham, Lambeth and Croydon, with Birmingham housing the largest Caribbean community outside of London. However, according to the ONS, if Caribbean migration to the UK had never happened in the way that it did, the UK population would be more characterised by Polish, Indian, German and Russian. But Britain's ethnic population would have still increased, as the Indian-born population represented 10% of all foreign-born residents, and those born of Pakistani origin nearly quadrupled. Migration would have also still occurred for many of African descent, as the Kenyan-born population also began to increase during the 1960s. But factors influencing migration were not always based on labour shortages. The rise in the Tanzanian-born population may have been a result of food shortages due to drought and famine, while a change in a country's political regime can also be a catalyst, as it was for many Ugandans, Cypriots and Iranians during the 1970s. Another group of Africans also had their own story to tell, due to the instability of the Second Liberation or Second Chimurenga from 1964 to 79 that swept across the nation of Zimbabwe. Where are these communities today? How are they continuing to thrive, and what is their contribution to British culture, politics, sport, entertainment and industry? The answers to these questions are possibly another learning journey for another article or podcast. Back in 1948, freedom of movement across the empire was available to everyone living in British colonies, but this legislation evolved and changed as time went on. It has been long implied that the Commonwealth Immigrants Act of 1968, the Immigration Act of 1971 and the British Nationality Act of 1981 were enacted on the premise that these ethnic groups changed the face of Britain, which gradually began to assume a darker hue, and therefore migration needed to be reviewed and curtailed. The people of the Caribbean may not have contributed towards this change of tone in the same way if June the 22nd, 1948 had never happened. However, the rise of nationalism that began in India and Ghana would have still swept across Africa and the Caribbean as a wind of change, bringing independence. Jamaica on the 6th of August and Trinidad on the 31st of August in 1962, with other islands following in quick succession, ending with St Kitts and Nevis on the 19th of September 1983. So, what could have been an alternative history for our Windrush generation? Another hypothetical question deserves another hypothetical answer, which was the inspiration for yet another piece of artwork in my alternative history gallery. What if Jamaica had never been colonised by the British? Visit the website and take a look. It is now well known that the African presence graced the Caribbean at least a century before the age of European exploration. This second piece of artwork not only suggests the possibility of not just what could have happened if those Caribbean pioneers had remained in the sun, but also what could have happened if Columbus had never set foot in Haiti. Here's wishing everyone a happy Windrush Day. May you enjoy your celebrations wherever you are, and our thoughts and prayers are with the Windrush generation, our magnificent pioneers, of which I myself am proud to be a part of its legacy, and to whom I am forever grateful. Once again, it is a pleasure and a privilege to share my learning journey with you in this podcast, and I continue to encourage you to either begin or continue your own. History is a matter of fact or perspective. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you on the next page.